What's up, my friends? Today was an excellent day. You know what happened. You already know what fucking happened. You don't need me to tell you what happened. So Valve has released new, or they have announced new hardware. This is actually important for once in our fucking lives. So, what's important about this? In case you fucked up and you got this wrong, the new computer is actually kind of interesting. But the VR headset, which is actually looks pretty cool, is ARM. Okay, the headset is ARM. The desktop is a Zen 4 CPU x64 with a RDNA 3 graphics. I don't know if it's integrated or a DGPU or if it's soldered onto the board or if it's got a probably not modular. Okay, we're looking at a custom built console here. I don't think the hardware is particularly special, and by that I mean it pretty much any distro should work on a new Steam machine. So don't worry if you think that fucking ArtX S6 isn't gonna work fine on a Steam Deck, or not Steam Deck. I mean, yeah, a Steam Deck, but Steam machine, because it probably will. But what is interesting about this though is a few things. First thing that's interesting is despite being RDNA 3, it has HDMI 2.1 support. Now, if you remember the problem with HDMI 2.1, it is that AMD's driver is open source, and so it exposes secrets in the HDMI 2.1 spec. So you're not allowed to run it at like 4K 120. You have to run it at a lower version of the HDMI spec. This is not a problem in DisplayPort, which is an open standard. To an extent, I don't really know exactly the licensing on that, but basically the HDMI consortium or whatever the fuck you call them hasn't fucked around with DisplayPort. That's all you really need to know. So HDMI 2.1, very interesting because that may mean this is integrated. Maybe I don't. That indicates to me that something might be integrated rather than a dedicated graphics card running an open source driver. I don't know how that's gonna work. I don't know if AMD has done something crazy. They might have just fucking misspec that or said, oh, if you run a proprietary operating system, it works fine. Like Windows, because obviously this isn't special hardware, so it can probably run Windows. Now, that's what we're going to talk about real quick. Not that it runs Windows, but we're going to talk about what this means for PC gaming. Something that I am obviously very interested in because I love PC gamers. They are my favorite people, and I do not hate their guts. But what's important about this is so people have talked, right? There's statistics and all that have come out about Steam users that are running Linux versus Windows and which distribution people are running. So Steam Deck, I believe, is taking up like 27% of the. I'm not going to show numbers, but I believe it's 27% of Linux Steam users are using SteamOS. 22% are using something called Ubuntu 22 Core, which may be a handheld operating system. I don't really know. It's not something I'm familiar with. I'd have to look it up. It may be a handheld OS though. I don't really know. But most of it is actually desktop use. So a lot of people are actually moving to a Linux desktop for their gaming at least. And the thing to remember with statistics is remember one, these are Steam users, so this is not a adequate or a realistic statistic on how many people are switching from Windows to Linux because not everybody uses Steam. Not everybody is a gamer. Not everybody uses their PC for gaming. Now, do I think that a lot of people are moving their computers over to Linux from Windows? Probably not. I don't really know, but probably not. What I do know though is new hardware. And new hardware is important because when you think about the mind of a PC gamer, it is actually not that different from the mind of a normie, except the PC gamer thinks that he has advanced knowledge of technology. Uh, and they may even work in a technology oriented field, but they lack a concept of software not as a product. When you think about what a product is, I can't give you an adequate definition, but what I can say is when we are talking about products and software, people don't really understand what an operating system is, what it does, why you should care about it, that you can change it, or that it does not necessarily need vendor support. So if we're getting into the mind of a normie, right? You go out to Best Buy or Micro Center or fucking Amazon, whatever the fuck you're going to. You're buying a computer, right? Your computer, if you buy a PC, is probably going to come with Windows. There are now options for you to buy Linux computers that are not Chromebooks, because while it is Linux, it's Chrome OS, so that's a different market entirely. But Linux computers, there's like Star Labs, there's Framework, there's Tuxedo, there's Nova Custom, there's System 76. You got all these fucking companies that'll sell you a Linux laptop, right? That means you have vendor support. The vendor explicitly supports Linux, and they likely have developers on board who are developing kernel code for their drivers for their hardware. This is important because it means that if you buy a Linux device, now I've already made a video saying that the concept is kind of bullshit, and you're still going to run into bugs on Linux, even if you buy these devices. Like I run Ubuntu on my Star Labs tablet. It's nice, it works for me, but fuck me if Mariah didn't run into 100 fucking bugs on it. You know what I mean? But what's important though is you can buy hardware with Linux pre-installed and supported on it. Uh, Now, as Linux users, we don't really give a fuck about that, but that is because we have expanded our brains. We have opened our minds to software freedom, and that we can fucking choose our own operating system, and it's a wonderful, wonderful concept to have. You know, it's a great thing. It's a great freedom to be able to do that. But I'm going to quickly do a thought experiment with you. Forget every fucking thing you know about Linux. You don't even know the word Linux, and you own a Windows computer. Because that is how most people are. They don't know what the fuck Linux is. You know what I mean? So what you're going to ask ourselves is, if I told you, hey, you can install Linux, the first thing that's going to run through your mind is one, what the fuck is Linux? Two, all of my games run on Windows. All of my software, every single program runs on Windows. And I did not check on the website to see does this run on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. And when I go to a website and say I need support, they'll say which version of Windows are you on. They will not say. Actually, I have had to do this before where I'm trying to access a fucking website from Linux, and they'll say what operating system are you accessing our website from, and I'll say I did it on Linux, but I also did it on Android and Windows and Mac OS. And they'll say, we do not support Linux. Please use a Windows computer to do this. I'm like, dude, it is a fucking web browser. It's a web browser, okay? It doesn't work on my phone either. You know what I mean? So if you ever run into that, yes, that is an actual problem I fucking face, and I am sure a few other people do too. So if you do, leave that in the comments. Uh, I do actually read those, surprisingly. But okay, so what's important about this, right? You know, I'm going off on a tangent, but basically the Windows user only knows Windows. They don't understand that their computer can not only run another operating system, but they don't know what the fuck runs on that other operating system. And even when I'm doing charity computers, I actually don't have the ability to give people manuals on how to operate Linux. So I'm assuming what they need is to check their fucking email and open up Firefox, and that is the extent of what they are going to do on that computer. I don't even expect them to update it. That's the real problem. But basically, they have to be able to open up a web browser, open up a file manager, and that's really about it, you know? So the Windows user does not have a concept of running another operating system. So what Valve is doing with the Steam Deck and this new Steam machine is they are giving you a demo of a fully working Linux environment on a desktop that is vendor supported on hardware you can buy. This is important because it is effectively popping PC gamers cherries in a very suggestive way. But like, okay, so if you only have a concept of Windows, if you now see Linux can not only run your games, you might also realize that most people aren't even running this on a Steam Deck or a Steam Steam machine. What they're doing is they're running it on a desktop, which is not vendor supported. And so, as Windows 10 comes end of life, what you're going to see is more people say, "Hey, I can run SteamOS. There's all these other Linux distributions. People are telling me about fucking Linux Mint. They won't shut the fuck up about Linux Mint. Linux Mint's fucking amazing. I can put that on my desktop, and I can actually run Linux on hardware I did not buy, but a computer I already own." And that's where Microsoft can really run into trouble is once people realize that Linux is not software as a product. It can be, and you can buy hardware that runs Linux, but you can also run Linux just on anything. And that is the point where people will quickly become free software evangelists because as they use their Steam Deck, a lot of people are actually getting rid of their low spec gaming PCs rather than upgrading them, especially in this fucking economy like Jesus fucking Christ. They are instead buying Steam Decks and buying docks for them and they are running a Linux desktop as their main operating system on their gaming machines. And I'll be real, if you had asked me this like 5 years ago, I was still dual booting Windows and Linux because I just couldn't use it for my gaming. Fucking nothing worked, you know? And it's gotten a lot better over the last 5 years, to the point where I don't have any machines running Windows right now, like at all. Like my last machine that run Windows, I just haven't plugged it in. It's not turned on. I can put whatever I want on it now, because I'm just not using Windows for anything, and I don't think I will for a long time. I gave away some of my repaired devices I did. I had like a ARM v7 Chromebook, which I needed the Windows computer for to write recovery software, and I jailbroke a Surface RT2 and put Windows 10 on it. But I gave those away to some boomers. They were excited to get their hands on them, so I said, yeah, you can just have these. So for right now, I don't need Windows at all on this computer. I probably won't in the near future. I don't think so. I think right now I can do everything I could ever want to do on Linux right now. So that's good. Obviously, you're gonna have creatives, but again, that's a different market than than gamers, you know. But even then, you'll see success stories from YouTubers like that one dude who does the animations, and he did that breaking up with Adobe video. You can use DaVinci Resolve. I don't give a fuck what the fuck you use for video editing. That is your choice as a professional. You can fucking use whatever the fuck you want. I don't give a fuck. Just you use whatever you need to. Just get out of my hair with it, you know. You have forsaken freedom in for productivity for the most part, so you get what you get. But for the rest of us, like us who have no fucking lives and just tinker with computers as a hobby, Linux is becoming much more viable option. But this is why I say that this is so important. Why the Steam Deck is so vital to the growth of Linux is because it shows people that you can run a Linux desktop. People that have never seen Linux, may have seen it in a YouTube video, who may have seen the Linus Tech Tips video and gave up on the idea. All these different types of people that they want to try Linux, but they don't know anything about it. They don't know if their software runs. And so you get people like me who are like, oh, throw it in a dual boot, work through the bugs, find the right distro for you, figure out how to run your software both in Windows and Linux, see what you can do. But really, what it's going to come down to is you need to give them a working demo somehow. And so having these somewhat reasonably priced Valve computers that not only run games, but you can also use as a full-fledged computer. This is important because it will show people that you do actually have a choice in operating system, which is something that we never really had. Like, obviously you could have used Linux like 10, 15 years ago, like I did, but like what the fuck were you doing on it? If your software stack wasn't fully FOSS, like you probably weren't having a good time, you know? Um, and so that's really why I'm so excited for these devices because I have so much trouble telling PC gamers that they do have a choice, they do, and it comes down to basically ignorance. It's why I get into fights with them so much in these videos is that I say, why do you want SteamOS of all things? You can use any distro you want, and I didn't realize that what they were really telling me was we don't know what Linux is. We've never heard of it before. We've never used it. so we don't really know what you're talking about because it's easy for me to come from a Linux desktop, record this video on a Linux desktop, and say, "Oh, you should already know all this," because my desktop's pretty fucking basic. Like I got pretty basic shit going on here. I got a web browser, I got fucking KDE, and I got Steam for for the most part. Everything else is kind of extraneous. But you got to kind of dial it back, and that's the thought experiment I want to give you is pretend that you don't know the word Linux, and anything related to Linux you don't know anything about. Uh, that is the mindset of people we are trying to convince right now, and that's why I'm so impressed in what Valve's doing. Not because I find their operating system particularly good. I think it's fine. If they made a desktop version of it, I might even like throw it on something just for shits and giggles. I might even like make a Steam console out of it or something if that ever happened. But for the most part, we are already Linux desktop users, so we already have this idea in our heads. We've already done the research. We've been doing this shit for so many years now. We've done the reading. We keep up with Linux news. It's all very interesting to us. Man, like fucking if I told people about my fucking init system, like what the fuck do you think they'd say about that? They're like, what the fuck is Arctic S6? Is like, what does S6 mean? It's like, oh, S6 is a evolution of fucking run it, you know? Oh, that's really cool. It's got daemon supervision, and they're like, I just want my computer to run, because Linus Torvalds had said in Revolution OS, if you've never seen that movie, it's free fucking everywhere. It's on archive.org, it's on YouTube, it's free on YouTube, no ads if you got an ad blocker. Um, you can go watch it, and it's got a lot of very interesting quotes by various open source pioneers. Eric Raymond, Richard Stallman, the whoever that guy was that wrote the open source definition, Linus Torvalds, they're all in that video. And Linus Torvalds had said near the very beginning, what is an operating system? And Linus Torvalds said nobody users don't really care what their operating system is as long as it loads their programs. Like the operating system is not meant to get in your way, basically. So you might remember this meme from like our Linux memes or something if you ever seen that. It's it was this survey, and it said, how likely are you to recommend Windows 10 to a friend? And somebody put 0 and said, I need you to understand that people don't randomly go around recommending operating systems to one another. And then there was like, a picture of the Linux user going, me, yeah. And that's kind of where we're at. We are the people who actually give a fuck about what our operating system is. We treat our computer and our software as separate products or separate thing. We may not even consider our software a product. I do because I have like a different philosophy about software than most people, but for all intents and purposes, normies will treat hardware and software as one and the same, basically, where you have one choice in each. Maybe you get to pick between an AMD or NVIDIA graphics card or an Intel or an AMD CPU or whatever motherboard you want, but at the end of the day, you're going to run Windows on it because that's what the vendors support. You don't see Linux supporting these things, even though it is very well supported, and a lot of times they do actually support the kernel and RAID drivers and everything. So, so So yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.